My evolution, I think to be anti-racist is constantly questioning and getting to a deeper level of consciousness, right? You never arrive because you're unpacking systems that you have literally been born and bred into. And so when I think about when Purpose Prep first launched, it was literally, how do you liberate children through their academics, right? Like, how do you make sure that they're on grade level, that they're empowered through their knowledge and skills?
Many people are stuck in the place that they're in largely because of the fact that they're not around people that challenge them. And it's not that they don't know those people don't challenge them, it's that they're scared to be alone.
I am going to make a personal commitment to execution over perfection.
Right now, my company is making, over $200,000 a month.
If you give me a piece of music, what am I going to play? And you put that same, piece of music or elements of music in the hands of Michael Jackson, what is that going to create? Little becomes much when you place it in the hands of the master.
Welcome to another edition of Believers Breathe, the podcast, where the aim is to help people embrace self-awareness, self-confidence, and self-worth. The way that I do that is I sit down with proven, successful leaders that have reached certain pinnacles of success, not just because of skill set, but because of mindset. And today is a different level of excitement for me because I'm sitting down with a fellow educator, and this is the first time that I've been able to do that. So I think today's conversation is not just going to be a podcast, but really an organic navigation of our thoughts, our feelings towards education, and then how this young lady here has been able to really have an impact on our youth. So I have Lagra Newman with me today, and if you could just introduce yourself for us.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Lagra Newman. I am the founder and head of school of Purpose Prep Academy. And we are an elementary school in the North Nashville community, serving kindergarten through 4th grade. Really proud of the work that we're doing and the success that we've had with our scholars and families and the impact that we're having in our community. Education is so important. It is the pathway to future opportunity and future success. And so I'm very passionate about education and, again, very humbled and honored to do the work here at Purpose Prep.
That's good. That's good. Sound like an educator. So I was introduced to you through somebody whose relationship I really value, and that's Anya Parker. And I think it goes without saying how much of a staple she is,
Absolutely.
Not only for you, but for myself as well. And so when she told me about you, of course, the nerd in me went out to just start looking you up and researching. And the first thing I thought was she looks young. And so most of my experiences when it comes to principals or people in education that are having that high level impact, I've always seen older people. And so to see you being so young, having the impact and starting something like Purpose Prep, I was like, where did this journey start for her? And so I'm interested to know if you could tell us a little bit about your upbringing and what your connection to education, how all this started.
Absolutely. When I think about education, I think about my parents and just the importance that they placed on me and doing well academically. My parents are originally from Washington, D.C., and they're actually products of a failing system when it came to education. My dad wasn't able to, have a trajectory that went to college. I was a first-generation college student. My mom actually graduated from college. She went back to school as an adult and graduated from college when I was graduating from high school. So that's a really proud moment. And then she went on to get her master's. But I constantly thought about the unrealized potential and impact that my parents could have had on society if they were taken care of by our nation and our community when it's come to education. But they made sure that I got, they were very serious about what it would take to make sure that I got an excellent education. And what that meant was placing me in private schools, driving over an hour to get to school, to, there and then another hour back, like making sacrifices so that I was placed in systems that would educate me at a quality level. I remember my mom, going to the Board of Education. Then it was a pretty antiquated system where you stood in line to register for the magnet program if you qualified. And I remember she was packing us up at 4 a.m. to stand in line for a building that didn't open until 8 or 9 so that I can get on the list for the magnet school program. So I always saw sacrifices and advocacy for me when it came to education, and it paid off. I went to college, I went to Vandy, and it was at Vandy that I participated in work study and chose the opportunity to tutor actually in North Nashville. And that was what sparked the fire for me to actually enter into education, because I had a group of students that I was charged with, reading with them. And it was, presented to me as read and, work on some words. It was very informal. And I sat in front of, a group of third graders, and they literally could not read. I'm talking about the sight word the, THE, third graders. And I was upset. I was confused. How could this happen? And I was also just angry because too often we question, why certain communities are not successful. And we focus on all of these adult behaviors. Oh, well, there's not that motivation, or, they're dropping out of school, or they're not focused. And it's what are you saying about the third grader that's sitting in class and can't read? And you're just continuing to act like this is normal. And then what do you say about this group of third graders that can't read that you put with this tutor from Vanderbilt that's not even a qualified teacher? What is happening? So it was that experience that exposed me to the injustices of education, how silent our nation was about what should be a burning fire school where everybody's emergency, and it was just part of what was normal there. So that, changed what I thought I was going to do. I was at Vandy at the time and, didn't know if I was, I was liberal arts, Spanish double major with communication studies. And that's when I was I'm going to go teach. And that's what I did.
That's good. So, interestingly enough, I have grown up in the house with an educator. My dad is still teaching right now.
That's amazing.
And so I feel like this path to education has happened very organically for me. And it upsets me just like you when I see situations like that with a room full of third graders. And most of the conversations about what's not working is coming from people who have not taken the time to invest in students.
Yep.
They've never stood in front of a classroom with 15, 20, 25 young eyeballs looking at them.
Exactly.
And don't really understand the pressure that comes with that. And so I value the fact that you saw a need and you ran with that need. So thank you as a fellow educator for doing that. So talking about going to Vandy and being a first generation college student, did you feel pressure from that?
Absolutely. As an adult looking back, because I've had to unpack, some of the experiences that I've had over the years, especially in running Purpose Prep and being able to compare the education that children here are receiving and then what that meant for my education. But the biggest thing that when I look back and I see missing was a sense of self and a sense of confidence navigating systems where I was constantly the minority. And that was all I knew in very, many circumstances. Again, my parents put me in private school, so I was, one of the very few African Americans in the school. The magnet program that I went to was majority Black, but the magnet program was majority white. And so that was very, triggering as you're navigating the hallway and you're seeing Black students going into this, regular class and then the advanced class, and you're one of the few. And so going to Vanderbilt, similarly, right, a very white, school, and, finding connections among, individuals who shared my identity, but recognizing that this is not okay, right? It is not okay to feel like you have to constantly be put in white systems to get a quality education. And that's what, my parents felt like they had to do for me. But part of, why I'm so proud about the work of Purpose Prep is that it should be normal for children to be in an environment of excellence and see themselves in that environment. They look around and they're like, you smart, you smart, you smart. Y'all look like me. Like, that is very validating, and I didn't have that. So yes, I think there was a lot of pressure of being in a space and figuring out how to compete and figuring out how to represent and what my worth was, what my, how I felt about myself. I think that, we know that as Black people, we're constantly navigating a society that will do anything it can to tell you you're less than. Right? There's so many different messaging and structures that seek to have you question the full value that is magnificent, that is of greatness, that originates from so much power. I mean, it's sad, that we even have to deal with that. But the reality is, and I was grappling with that as a college student, and I'm very aware of that. I wasn't as aware of it then, because it's what you do. You're navigating the system and you think this is what you're supposed to be doing. But now looking back, I recognize that there were maybe decisions that I made or things that I didn't take advantage of because I was still grappling with, my potential, my capability. I remember my first semester, I rarely partied. College is meant you're supposed to have fun, you're supposed to get to know. I was like, I got to figure out how to pass these classes. Like, I didn't have a precedence. My parents dropped me off and they were like, you better do well, So I was stressed. It took me a while to recognize that I was supposed to be there. Again, that's why I think about the work that we do at Purpose Prep and how proud I am that the affirmation of identity is solidified very early on, because there's a lot of students that can get lost in who they are because they don't have that.
So I'm reading a book now entitled "How to Be Anti-Racist."
Oh my gosh! Yes, yes, Ibram Kendi, right?
Wonderful book.
So good.
Highly recommended to anybody listening.
So good.
And he talks about how some of the Black scholars before us talked about this dual consciousness. And fighting and grappling against the power that you spoke about, the magnificence that we have, but also the assimilation that we've kind of been coached to have when it comes to what success looks like, especially in the realm of education. So in speaking about someone like X in that book that talks about that dual consciousness, how do you help your staff, the people that support your vision, to be able to pour into the young scholars at Purpose Prep?
The question actually reminds me of what Angela Davis has said. In a racist society, it is not enough to not be racist. You must be anti-racist. And I think that, my evolution, I think to be anti-racist is constantly questioning and getting to a deeper level of consciousness, right? You never arrive. Because you're unpacking systems that you have literally been born and bred into. And so when I think about when Purpose Prep first launched, it was literally, how do you liberate children through their academics, right? Like, how do you make sure that they're on grade level, that they're empowered through their knowledge and skills, right? This understanding that it's not acceptable to do what some schools are doing and give this false degree of esteem where students get A's and they think they know something, and then by the time they get to, middle school, they realize that they're significantly behind, right? So this true understanding of like the value and the confidence that you have through the acquisition of knowledge. But over the course of the trajectory of Purpose Prep, I realized that there were some seminal experiences that we were creating for students that was actually adding a heightened level of identity affirmation. And so I'll give you a few examples. In our second year, I believe it was either our first or second year, it was the 50th anniversary of the Selma Montgomery March. And, I was talking with my staff and team, and I was like, we need to be there. Like, we're talking, to our students about what it means to be agents in their communities, create change. We need to go. One, I just personally wanted to go. And so we literally reached out to families, and we were like, if you're interested, let us know. And literally we took 2 chartered buses to Selma to participate in the march. And it was just this, students had signs. One of our children's grandfathers grew up in Selma and was literally crossing the bridge, tearing up about the memories of his childhood. So seminal experiences have been created here, creating curriculum. In kindergarten, we expose them to Africa because it's this idea that children's understanding of self, Black children's understanding of self doesn't start in 1619. Mm-hmm. With what you try to create us to be, right? And even the difference between the slaves and enslaved people, right? You tried to enslave us. We were human fully, right? So just really pushing ourselves to a higher level of consciousness as adults, which is why, our staff, they're reading a variety of different texts, one of which, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, understanding the structures and systems that have been created that seek to oppress our children. If you are not conscious enough to understand that schools were created intentionally to fail, which is why we have to do something radically different to support success, then this isn't a good fit for you at Purpose Prep, because we're constantly dismantling and recreating systems that are best supportive of our students. But it's that consciousness and really understanding that. So I think it's one, starting for the adults, the staff, and making sure that we are knowledgeable and pushing ourselves to be anti-racist. And then what are the experiences and exposure that we want our students to have that have them leave Purpose Prep with not only strong academic foundation, but also, I'm Black and I'm proud.
Yes.
I'm Black and I'm proud. And so if I go to Harpeth Hall, which is a majority white private school, which is one of our students is there, and I check on her, Abrielle, I'm excelling. I might be the only Black child in my classroom, but Miss Newman, I'm doing well academically, and I am adding value to that school because of who I am. And I think that's what we're trying to create here. You go into systems and you are more successful because you have a strong sense of self.
I like that. Keep going, Abrielle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about growing up in a private school.
Yeah.
And so what I'm eager to get in and journey with you through is how you decided to start a charter school. I've heard your story. Now we have some background about why you're so passionate about education, but you could have gone into education a bunch of different ways.
Right.
But you chose to found a charter school. So one, can you tell us how you decided to go that route? And then can you also break down for us the difference between private, charter, public? Because I think a lot of us kind of group them as all the same, and not really know.
Absolutely. So one, I wanted to stay public. It was important that our school was free and open to students who needed us the most. There wasn't the sense of privilege that I was seeking, right? I wanted to make sure that the most vulnerable children and families could be served by the work of Purpose Prep. So I always knew that it was definitely public. So that ruled out private. And then that left charter and district, because both of those are public.
Yep.
And the district is with all due respect, failing children. And that is not okay. And actually, I've been trying to reconcile what it means to both especially as a high-performing school that's public, that serves children, similar demographics in this community, that is having high levels of success. I've been trying to reconcile what it means to have empathy for teachers who may be trying to push results and support children in schools with accountability for, you can't fail for decades and continue to think that this is acceptable in how we serve our children. And I think that that's something that I really struggle with, right? Because certainly you're well-intentioned, right? Certainly you've got into education with, high hopes of serving children hopefully, right? But at the same time, like, I am a little bit cynical of that, because it's like, have you done anti-racist work? Are you holding high expectations for the children that enter into your building? Are you being held accountable for putting rigorous work? Are you doing the professional development? What's happening here? Because our experience is, if you're putting rigorous curriculum in front of students, if you're holding high expectations, if you're inspiring and motivating children, if you're collaborating and sharing best practices, you're going to get results. So what's happening here?
Year in and year out.
Year in and year out. I mean, it's really sad.
And so with that said, what is that like to? Because I mean, some of the kids that you may come into your school, whether it be pre-K or whether it be a student transferring to you, may not have had that rigor before Purpose Prep.
Mm-hmm.
What is that adjustment like for them? And then, what is that process like for teachers that are trying to address the needs of that student?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how do you walk that line of rigor and empathy, like you mentioned?
Yeah. So I think it's challenging for children to transition into Purpose Prep mid-year, mainly because mid-year and even mid-elementary experience.
Yeah.
So whether you're coming in to the school year mid-year or you're coming in as a third grader and you didn't have that foundation, it's challenging. We've even added additional supports in our organization for just new parents because we see that they just need that extra support and encouragement. But I think the biggest shock is actually when we have that initial assessment of students. So after they're admitted, we assess students to determine, what's the best as we think about classrooms and placements and where they go. And oftentimes that's a very disappointing conversation for the parent, because they're learning for the first time that means A's and B's that were just recklessly put on the report card and had no substance actually means something very different at Purpose Prep, when we're giving you not so much A's and B's, but this is the reading rate of your child. This is the words that they can comprehend. This is or the text that they were able to comprehend. Actually, your child's supposed to go into the third grade, but they're actually reading at a first grade level. And you're finding this out for the first time. And I think, again, it speaks to the system and how we're failing families and children, and they don't even know.
Yeah.
And then when you have the generational failure, where it's like, this is a system that I've trusted because my mom went here, my grandma went here, but you're realizing that there is no economic advancement because you're not acquiring any additional skill sets through the educational experience. You also probably don't have a strong value for the system because it's not serving you well. People often say, well, why are your families so invested in Purpose Prep? Because children are learning here, like they're excited about their child learning how to read. Like that kindergartner who comes home and is like starting to read, the shift between the parent reading and the child being able to read, like parents get excited by that. So it is challenging for those students, but we keep the end goal in mind.
Yep.
They're capable. They'll get there. It's going to be challenging, as school should be, right? School should be challenging for even students who have started with us. Like they still get challenged. Yeah, because that's how you grow and learn. So it's really about supporting families to stick with it. Stay with us. We know this is challenging. We know they didn't have homework every night. That's a good thing now that they have homework every night because they can reinforce the skills that they've learned at school. we know that, it's demanding and that we're holding expectations and, providing additional supports, whether that's interventions, whether, students get pulled into additional small groups here that support them to kind of get extra support with content. So there's a lot of structures in place that we have to catch children up. But really what parents start to see with sticking with us is that the progress is there. Whoa, even if my child leaves by the end of that year still not fully on grade level, it's undeniable the progress that they've made since entering. And that's what we share transparently with parents around. This is where they came in. Look what they can do now, and keeping them motivated that way, and keeping the child motivated. Children know, when they're learning, when they're challenged, they know when they step into an environment. I mean, we have a lot of children who step into our environment. They're like, "Whoa,
what is this?"
They're like, this wasn't happening in my old school, But we create an environment where we celebrate that type of environment. Oh, we're cool here. Oh, we learn here. We're the highest performing, we're the highest performing school in the state. Oh, we the highest performing. I'm a high performer. Yes, you are. You go to a great school, So we really kind of have that pride to motivate them and inspire them to work hard and to put their best foot forward.
That's good. And I've stood in Purpose Prep before and watched people from looks like all around the country standing with notepads, just taking notes, trying to figure out what are they doing over there.
Yeah, that's funny. You were on a visitation day. Yeah.
So that's fun. What do you say to the person that walks into Purpose Prep and turns their nose up at feeling like it's militarized, they're wearing uniform, they're all the same? Because I'm sure that you receive some
absolutely
critique about things like
yeah,
that.
I absolutely do. It's interesting, you come to Purpose Prep, we'll have our community meeting where students are, raising their hands and they're chanting and they're cheering and they're answering rigorous questions. And, I could always tell by the follow-up of us, how somebody's processing it, whether it's like, wow, I see so much joy in that, or somebody who's like, do they have recess? I'm like, that was just recess. That was recess. They don't need to go to the playground. That was joy. That was fun. That was learning. So it's always funny, it's like, do they have? It's like, that's what you have. That's the question you have. So I think that really gets at it, right? It's about knowing the purpose behind everything we do. So why do we have structure? Because we want to maximize instructional time. If you don't have systems and structures as a teacher, then there's a lot of wasted time. That's the difference between our classrooms where transitions are less than 30 seconds and classrooms I visited where it's like, okay, put that up, go over here, now. And then, I'm sitting there like, oh my God, you done wasted about 10 minutes of instructional time, So it's the purpose behind it. We're not, walking in a single file line just because we want to walk in a single file line. We're walking in a single file line because that's the most orderly way to get 400 children around our building to their classroom so that they can actually spend time where they really need to be spending time, which is in literacy with a text, reading and annotating the text and having deep discussions. So I think it's like, if you really know the purpose behind those structures, you'll understand. And so people who get it, who have either been in dysfunctional schools and they're like, oh, whoa, this is great. The structures you have, because you see the purpose. You see what happens and the chaos that happens when you don't have that. So, yes, I think it's about, again, the purpose and knowing exactly why we do what we do and us knowing the purpose. Because there's some schools that try to emulate us and if it lacks purpose, it's implemented wrong. And so it's about, that we talk about the difference between purpose and power. This isn't about, instructing students to do something a certain way just because. This is about engaging our children in structures that support their academic success, and they know why. I don't have time to be, trying to figure out how to get to where when 30-second transition, I'm where I need to be. I'm ready to learn. Let's go. And students see that.
And what happens is when that structure is not in place, now they say those kids have behavior problems, and now they have ADHD and all this stuff. So thank you. Thank you for structure. I'd much rather them have that rigor and have that structure here where people are caring about them, opposed to being thrown away, and now they have to find out about structure in a way that we've seen so many times.
Yeah, and we have those same behavior students, but they don't manifest themselves that way. Right? Like, we get, send them to Purpose Prep. They can handle the behavior because that's the kind of reputation we have. But it's like, these aren't behavior children, right? Like, they're demonstrating actions that are in response to the systems or lack of systems that you've set up for them. So if you've given them free range as a child, I'm operating in the lack of understanding of what I'm supposed to do in this environment. And unfortunately that gets, overly identified for children of color, particularly in white systems. So we have to really be critical of those systems as well. We have to hold white people accountable. Purpose Prep has a diverse staff. We're literally about 50% African-American teachers, 50% white teachers. And all of us are deeply pushing each other to engage in anti-racist work. So I think it's about holding all, individuals, black and white, because there's a lot of black teachers who have internalized low expectations for their communities as well. So yeah, they're not immune from that, I've walked into, I've had some, even when I first started teaching in LA, colleagues where I'm like, what are you doing? So I think it's just, holding educators accountable to being anti-racist.
Racist against oneself. That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking at the fact that you started a school and we've heard about the great things that are happening, I think that a lot of people may overlook the entrepreneurial side of everything that you have to do, what all has come with it. And so I want to unpack that for people, especially for someone else that wants to be the next Lagra Newman. And so if you could, what does that journey look like? I mean, we're sitting inside of Purpose Prep right now. Everything looks like a well-oiled machine, but it didn't start this way. So you had the idea, you had the vision, but can you speak to the execution of Purpose Prep?
Absolutely. I often tell people that if I had known, I think so coming into this work of launching a school, I was coming from the lens and experience of a teacher and instructional coach. And I tell people, if I had known then what would be required to launch Purpose Prep, I honestly would have stepped back. Because I wasn't trying to be an entrepreneur. I was just trying to create a school, and I was thinking about it from the vision of teaching. But all that other stuff really challenged me, and I'm glad that I didn't know, because I was involved now in work of creating a school, and once I start something, I don't give up, I don't quit. So I was like, this is going to happen, and we're going to do this. But it was really challenging. It was everything from, I remember, so I trained through an organization called Building Excellent Schools out of Boston. And this organization, in my interview, which I originally applied to work at one of their schools, and at the end of the interview, they asked me to be a fellow and to create my own school. And I remember being like, whoa, that's a little bit beyond what I was asking for. And they were like, when you talk about the vision of what schools should be, you need to create that. That does not exist. I want you, and we will support you to create that. I prayed about it, I reflected on it, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. And it pushed me, because it was everything from, when I think about finding a facility for Purpose Prep, I'm in real estate now. I don't even have a home. I'm still living in an apartment. I don't know about, so now I'm going and studying property and trying to figure out square footage for classrooms and what? My financial skills really greatly improved, because now I'm managing the budget of an organization, and where is our funding coming from? Grant writing, trying to get resources for the organization, board development, managing a board, and finding and engaging community stakeholders and investing them to contribute and volunteer to Purpose Prep. Staffing and hiring and talent recruitment. I mean, where the teachers gonna come from? Okay, I gotta figure that out. Marketing. Okay, so now I gotta create I was literally I just want to teach. So it was challenging, but I approached it with tackling one thing at a time. In terms of like, this is what I'm working on, and okay, now I'm building this skill set. Okay, now I'm building this skill set, and not giving up, and pushing myself when it was really tough. I remember the first time I had a board retreat, and I felt so unprepared to facilitate for, my founding board. I admire them so much. I had some of the best people in this city that was part of the board for Purpose Prep. I remember being nervous for those initial meetings, but now bringing them all together for our first board retreat, I remember being so nervous, but stepping into that and being, and pushing myself into spaces and out of my comfort zone was the biggest thing. So
that's a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot. And then you were not even talking about the planning and the launching of the school, and then running it with children and staff, and then managing all of those things at the same time as well. So, I'm thankful for mentors in my life. There was other leaders that I so grateful for, that really adopted me. One of my, they're such good friends now, Julie Jackson, Juliana Worrell. They're very influential in education, and they were running powerhouse schools, and I literally saw their schools and just asked them pretty much to adopt me. I was just like, even though they're in New Jersey, and they did everything from allow me to shadow them, allow me to study their schools. And then when Purpose Prep launched, they even came and supported us with professional development, trained our teachers. So just generous support of me. And again, being proactive and recognizing that I need more growth and development. So how do I seek it out proactively and get it? And they were there for that. Again, just pushing through and just really, I can't even emphasize enough not giving up, because there were lots of moments where I really had to reevaluate if I was going to continue in this work. But it stayed focused on, I have a purpose and I need to realize it.
Of the things that you mentioned about that journey, what would you say was the most difficult? Was it the finding the building, finding the funding, finding the staff, marketing the school? Where were you just like, you know what, I am done with this. Yeah. I am walking away.
I think it was, oh my goodness. I mean, as someone who is driven by teaching and students, children, and just being in an environment of learning with children, all of that was stressful because it was managing and interacting from adults, executive director hat. And I've grown to love some of those elements, but I would say that I can't even identify one particular one, because now having to try to manage all of them with high degrees of success, you can't recruit talented teachers if your marketing isn't high quality that's attractive to them. And if you're it's just like, if you're marketing, then that's student enrollment and engagement, so it's like all of these different pieces and trying to do each one really well. I think the biggest thing, Jeremy, is that in the other reality of being an entrepreneur is I really didn't even have a personal life. For a good, I don't know if entrepreneurs talk as transparently about this, but from the planning year to the launch of Purpose Prep and those initial years of just getting us off the ground and getting us successful, I mean, I was at, the school from, anywhere from 5-something and not leaving until almost 7 o'clock at night. Weekends, I was back at the school. It was a grind. And one that I'm, grateful to have done. Now we're a well-oiled machine, so we have staff and we have capacity, but lifting that up as the founder was incredibly challenging. And it was sacrificial. But I kept comparing the work that I do now with the civil rights movement and recognizing that even in the challenges and the, lack of personal, professional balance, which, is pretty non-existent in my role, which is okay. But the impact is actually, I'm not worried about surviving. Or, in the civil rights movement, I mean, it was a whole different level of what sacrifice looked like, right? So there's a little bit of privilege that I carry because of my ancestors, right? Like what it meant to protest and stand up for children's education or children's rights or even human rights. Their lives were threatened. Their houses were bombed. They were shot and killed. So the work that I do now, I recognize still has privileges, even in the intensity of not having all of the different aspects that I think I would personally prefer. But this work is just greater than that, and I have to recognize that.
That's huge. That's huge. And so what do you look for in a teacher?
So much, yeah.
And I ask that because you have had that experience and you value it so much.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that for a teacher coming into your school, it could be intimidating sitting across from you, hearing how well the school is doing, knowing your intentionality. If you had a prototype teacher, what does that person look like?
Yeah, well, and all of our teachers, when they interview, we tour them. So it's not even me. They're looking at these classes like, whoa, what's happening here, And the thing about who we hire is less about their skill set. You said it.
Mindset. Yeah.
It's about mindset, right? That's what we're looking for. So we'll teach you how to be a good teacher. Let's actually dig into your mindset. Why are children being failed by the educational system? And if you can't make connections to structural racism, if you can't understand that there's efforts that schools can do to improve student learning, if you're scapegoating failure on families not being invested in education, children are hungry, we got breakfast and lunch that we serve at Purpose Prep, right? Not to say that like mitigates all the effects of children and like hunger, but my point is like, actually, let's talk about the school down the street that like doesn't have a teacher for science for their 5th grade class. Like that's why the children don't know how to, right? Like let's talk about the lack of curriculum that's rigorous for children. That's why children aren't learning, right? So there's too often a scapegoat of failure, and it's misplaced and placed on families and children. And so if you're coming in with that mindset, you're not going to be a good fit at Purpose Prep. No, you're not going to get hired. And I'm going to have a whole educational. It was so funny. My interviews used to last so long in the beginning years because I used to feel like it was my personal like mission to then educate you. Like, wait, that's not, I was like, I ain't got time to be wasting on these people. They just can't. But I used to like spend, extra time being like, let me actually make sure you leave knowing why schools are truly failing. And it is not the children.
And it's so good right now. In where we are in our world, because we can actually see people that fail to acknowledge those systems. They won't even say that it's true. And so it was really good for me to hear from a fellow educator who's white to say, I don't think our kids have an achievement gap, they have an opportunity gap.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that, like to see the work unfold at Purpose Prep makes me excited not only about these scholars, but hopefully people around can begin to see that we just have to create a system that gives these black kids, these brown kids, an opportunity.
Absolutely.
So what is the next step for Purpose Prep? Are you going to stay elementary? Will it evolve into middle and high? Is it going to be another elementary? I'm sure you get this question.
Let me just say something to what you just said too, though. I think it's so powerful. To your point, right? Like we're currently in this climate of social justice. We're in a pandemic. We've had protests around Black Lives Matter. And I think that that's also something that if you can't acknowledge why Black Lives Matter exists and is a real valid thing, then you can't step in front of 30 black children and inspire them and support them and hold high expectations for them. Because you can't even acknowledge that there is a real crisis as it pertains to black lives. And that's the neutrality that is to the point about, how to be anti-racist. That's racist. And I think that that's, again, the mindset. Like, we are really pushing for individuals who have done some type of work to get to a place where they are acknowledging and conscious of those systems that are impediments to our students' progress, but also willing to be dedicated and committed and passionate about rectifying that as best we can in the work of Purpose Prep.
Yep. Even when they get to the place of acknowledging it, well, what do we do?
Exactly.
What's the steps forward?
Exactly.
So will you replicate Purpose Prep?
So we were very fortunate. Jalen Ramsey with the LA Rams gifted us with an investment of $1 million. And for someone who, I was going to say is one of my areas that was like my least favorite, fund development. Thank you, Jalen Ramsey. Game changer. And, when we were gifted that investment, I had to thank him on behalf of Purpose Prep, but also on behalf of investing in a Black woman who's leading a school, who we already know that it's so difficult to get funding for our organizations. Purpose Prep is funded by the school district per pupil funding, but the reality is there's still great disparity in funding as it pertains to us needing a facility, us having buses. We have 4 buses, so there's a lot of gaps that we have to have private funding and support for.
Can I pause you there?
Yes.
I just want to have a moment of clarity. When you say per pupil funding, I don't know if a lot of people know what that means and why enrollment is important for a school like Purpose Prep.
Right. So our funding from the district is based on how many students that we serve. So for every student, we're allocated a certain amount of money, and that's what funds our school. And for many years, grants supported Purpose Prep in the beginning because you obviously have a lot of work to do before you even get students. That's the thing. As a charter school, you need a building before children come. You need desks and furniture. You need teachers and staff. We have 3 weeks of professional development before students even get there. We've got to fund that. So that was really tough in the beginning. And that's also why I was very overstretched as in my role of head of school, because I was like running teacher professional development. I was coaching and supporting teachers. I was then trying to, make sure that we got extra funding. I mean, it was a lot. But that's the funding that you need. So we use grants and private donations to support us before we were operating with children and receiving funding from the district. When we operated, the majority, we did have some, fundraising success, but the majority of our model is actually based on our per pupil funding. But this $1 million is game changing. And it has caused us to really question, like, what's next for our organization. And, I've been praying and just thankful to God, because when you have an experience like I had in those early years and you don't feel like you have any sort of balance, and then your organization grows and you realize, like, you have so much balance, again, balance is relative. So let's be clear. I'm not talking 50-50, but balance of, like, I can leave work and truly be like focused on when I go home, and not trying to still be working. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for what we've been able to achieve and the wheels churning that are going successfully. So the thought of like jiving back into founding is a little scary and apprehensive for me, right? Because I'm like, whoo, I remember. But I have a team. I have an amazing team that's dedicated, that's trained up, that's invested, that's, going to support the continuous success. So I have to also understand that part of your goal as a founder is to create an organization that actually exists beyond and in advance of you, right? Because that's how you're going to ultimately achieve the full success. And that's what we've been able to do. And so I look forward to the organization continuing to grow and the individuals who have been groomed in Purpose Prep, who run Purpose Prep like me, continuing to make sure that we support and educate and expand to serve more children. That's not definitive yet. We're currently in planning and just really trying to think about the best use of resources. We're in a pandemic, technology and closing the digital divide. There's a lot of priorities that we have, but we are considering expansion in a way that if you had asked me even a year and a half ago, I would have been like, no.
Gotcha. And what has this pandemic looked like for your kids?
We're virtual, so that's been a lot of learning. We've been able to, outfit all of our families with computers, hotspots, technology training. Our ops team has dived into, we've learned so much about technology. Even me, I'm like, I know how to share a screen. I know how to do breakout rooms on Zoom. We do Google Meet with students just for additional security purposes. They have emails. I mean, the technology, the great thing about this experience is that technology, it shifted everybody to be and manage technology. And, we were joking about when we go back to the physical, which is no time soon, but when we do go back, all those paper slips that we would print and put in everybody's folder, you're gonna get an email from us. So we've been able to transfer our families, and we're gonna continue to equip them with technology so that they have that even when we're back brick and mortar. But it's been a learning process. I'm amazed at virtual classrooms. I pop in and I observe our teachers, one of which, I should share this, 95% of staff returned going into this year, which was critical for the type of retention we would need to go into a pandemic. Our teachers are rocking it out virtually. You go into classes and you are surprised that actual teaching is happening. It's wait, because you mute my computer, children are in there, they're typing in the chat box, their responses, they're weighing in, do you agree, do you disagree? Okay, unmute yourself, tell us why. It's beautiful.
That's good. Did you, because I know for teaching, it is oftentimes a feeling that you really can't describe. It's knowing, feeling the energy of the students in the classroom. Do you miss that?
Of course. There's nothing like the physical. There's just nothing like it. So the hugs, the high fives, the, just the interaction, it's invaluable. We are making it work. We're doing the best that we can with what we have. We understand that safety is the number one priority, and it's had us pivot in a way that supports students differently. Just a lot of support structures that have been added just to manage this, this pandemic. But also trying to create normalcy too. We actually had our first virtual field trip. It was an idea that I pitched, and my team was like, man, that ain't gonna be virtual. I'm like, no, it could be fun. They could go to so we listed all these different, was it a museum or aquarium? Teachers got to vote on what they wanted, and it was a blast. I mean, they were literally watching the video of the fish swim. And talking about the different types of fish, and then they had different activities throughout the day that tied to the field trip. And my nephew goes to Purpose Prep, and the whole weekend after the virtual expedition field trip, he was just on aquarium sites, look at this, so.
You sparked something.
We did. But just trying to keep that normalcy, having a field trip, or we're going to have a movie day and wear pajamas to one of our last classes before heading into the winter break. So just keeping that community. We have community meetings and students get to engage and interact. So we're managing the best we can. Again, hoping that our community and city will do what we need to do to get us on track, our state, our nation, so that we can resume in person.
Gotcha. So a couple of the students that I'm most intrigued about are Anaya Zachary and Cole Duncan. Could you talk to us about that?
Anaya Zachary and Cole Duncan, that's so sweet. So my mom and I became published authors, and that was a fun experience. My mom loves writing and never thought that she would actually share her thoughts publicly. She was the one that was always writing me these letters, and it was so creative. I was like, oh, you got poetry that you're sending me, So we decided to just come together and collaborate on how to tell the stories of Purpose Prep. Anaya Zachary is a student who is an overachiever, wants to be first. Her image is actually drawn from my niece, whose name is actually Anaya. And it's this, challenging experience she has when she gets to school and realizes that she's not always going to be first in everything. And it goes into what it means to be a winner. And then with Cole Duncan, a student who is diving into government, student class president. And it's still managing the insecurities that children have about their different parts of themselves that they're not fully comfortable about, but having a group of friends that supports him to, know his full potential, right? And I see that all the time at Purpose Prep. You can do it, or so-and-so, I'm so proud of so-and-so because they were on green today. The child's beaming, So children here motivate and encourage each other in so many ways, and that's reflected in that book with Cole Duncan.
That's good. Do you plan to write more and give us more characters? How does it feel, and do you have, more ideas coming with books?
Yes. We're navigating a variety of different, just running Purpose Prep virtually, and there's a lot of different priorities. So we definitely have ideas, but want to take the time to actually continue to develop it over time. Those projects were, one was during a period of time when I have a 2-year-old, and I was on maternity leave, and it was the first time I had stepped away from the work of Purpose Prep, and my creative juices were flowing, and that's where we were able to finalize the project. So I don't know if I need a sabbatical to be able to figure it out, but yeah, it's something that we definitely want to continue to do, and just figuring out where it fits with all the other things that we're diving into.
That's good. That's good stuff. Well, there's something that I like to do on the podcast, and that is to take the life out of the things that handcuff people, prevent people from taking the first step. So I'll blow up this balloon, and if you could just give me one word or one phrase that you feel handcuffs people in those moments where they have to do marketing, and they have to do the real estate aspect and the hiring, and prevents them from taking the step that they can see in their head, and prevents that thing from manifesting.
Absolutely.
I always struggle to blow this thing. Lefty.
Yes.
Insecurities. Can you kind of walk us through what you mean?
Yeah, I think about just, to your point, you mentioned my age, which I'm older than people think, though. I will say that. Black don't crack. I am older than people think, but I am still young, right? And I was definitely young. I remember doing I was launching a school at 30. And I think that I was stepping into spaces where I had to assert myself in a certain way and manner. And there was insecurities that I had. And I think that that's okay. The reality is you're not always going to feel fully confident the first time you do things. But over time, you develop, and you fake it until you make it. So let's be clear. I don't know that people knew that I was, struggling from, dealing with any kind of self-confidence issues, or that I was nervous. But I was. People tell me that I still get nervous with certain things that I do even now. And Anya, she's always like, nobody would ever know. And I'm like, because I don't necessarily dwell on it. That's the thing. I'm not like, oh my gosh, I'm so there. I'm just like, I get focused and I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out, and I pray and I push through. So I think that, what I want to say is insecurities leave over time when you build your confidence, and the only way you can build your confidence is by doing it. And doing it again and doing it again. And there were times when, I butchered it, but I got back up and did it again and got better at it. And so it's okay to have insecurities. It's okay to step into and out of your comfort zone. You should, because that's how you grow and that's how you make an impact that is worthy of the world gaining your talents and your gift. And that's what you're put on this earth to do. And so, and God, I'm very spiritual, and I understand that everybody has a purpose, and God is going to support you to manifest that purpose. And you just have to trust in that and keep walking forward. You know, they say pray and then and walk along the way. Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. So.
That's powerful. Thank you. So we're going to take the air out of those insecurities.
Yes.
And challenge people to go and get their purpose. So people who want to connect with Lagra, what she's doing in Purpose Prep, how do they keep up with the journey of the school, and how do they keep up with you?
So Purpose Prep is, come visit us. Obviously, you know, you can visit us virtually. Actually, we've started to do virtual tours.
Yeah.
But we really do. I mean, to your point, when those visitors were there taking notes and stuff, like, we love to have people who are eager to see our work in action. And if you're interested in learning about that, that's definitely something we can coordinate. Our website is www.purposeprep.org. And then I'm, you know, happy to talk and support anyone who's traveling along this journey. I recognize that our children, so many of our children are not in high quality learning environments. And we need more individuals who are dedicated and committed to this work and to elevating excellence, Black excellence in particular, making sure that our children manifest the potential that they already have within them. So we need, and I'm, you know, a fan of and always willing to support individuals who are invested in making sure that happens for our children.
Solid. Cool.